want to know from your perspective, why, and you talked a little bit about this, but why should people consider a third party now when it's, the most important election of our lifetime, as they all are? And how do you and the party plan to have ballot access so people can actually vote for you?
Great, really important questions. So, like, why consider a third party? One of the responses to that is that the American people are demanding a third party. So that's like why it's really important to consider it. And, there's just been such a history of cumulative failure by the two parties, which are bought and paid for by bankers and billionaires and fossil fuel barons, and the usual suspects kind of hold a monopoly on the two major parties. So it's kind of like beyond needing an explanation. It's sort of like you'd have to explain why you wouldn't want a third party when the two that exist are very busy throwing you under the bus and have been basically lying and misleading you for decades. Why would you not demand a third party? And it's only because there's such a nonstop wall-to-wall propaganda campaign about how we can only have two choices and how it's a very dangerous thing if you let people start expressing their wishes politically, how dangerous that is. That just requires a nonstop propaganda campaign. And once you step outside of it, you realize it's just totally ridiculous. There are so many reasons to have a third party right now, and the thing that people complain about, which is that, oh, you're going to spoil the election, you're going to throw it one way or the other, is nonsense. The largest voting group are the non-voters, the eligible voters who don't vote. In 2016, my last campaign, they were 100 million people. And Greens, it's been shown by talking to people and by polls, if people who vote Green are people who otherwise overwhelmingly will stay home. We're not taking away votes that belonged to someone. Votes belong to the voter. And any candidate who tells you that your vote belongs to them, by definition, should be ineligible for consideration of your vote, because that's just a basic anti-democratic position to take. And we shouldn't have to defend our right to a vote. Our whole democracy is premised on the right to vote, which means you get to choose, because what good is your vote if you're simply carrying out marching orders for the ruling parties? That's not a vote. And the notion that the Democrat owns your vote is outrageous. They have to earn your vote. And, again, if they think they're entitled to it, then they should not even be considered. So I've become personally just like really disgusted by this question and how it is used to like keep people brain dead. It's used to help people like not think, so that they will simply carry out the marching orders of the political elites who are very busy throwing them under the bus. And I encourage people to remember a couple things. So one is the most spoiled election ever for Democrats was 2010, the midterms of 2010. What happened then? Basically, the Democrats were punished for throwing out 8 million homeowners from their homes while they bailed out Wall Street. That was a Democratic trifecta that implemented that policy. They were punished. And that's when people became, they weren't voting for Trump. They were voting, well, that was in the subsequent election. They weren't voting, they're voting against Democrats. And it's not like, oh, third parties did this. In 2010, there were no third parties in that election, at least not that I'm aware of, but the Democrats lost 1,000 state representative seats in legislatures. They lost 64 congressional seats. They lost 12 Senate seats and 13 governorships. It was a total defeat for Democrats. And it's that problem that the Democrats are spoiling this for themselves by abandoning their base and their principles. And that didn't just happen in 2008, but it became, really very evident. Because in 2008, why did that crash happen? Because the safeguards that had been implemented after the earlier crash in the Great Depression, those safeguards, especially separating out investment banks from commercial banks, so that big bankers and financial, manipulators could not gamble with your money. They can
It's
gamble
just-
with their own money, fine, but it's your money they want to gamble with. And so the safeguards for that were destroyed by who? Larry Summers, under Bill Clinton. They're the ones who repealed the that basic protection, and that came crashing down in 2008. And who was it that Obama appointed to be head of the Treasury? It was Larry Summers, the guy who had destroyed protections for the public interest in the economy and created really the basis for that very crash. So it's been long in coming. The Democrats have been a very sold out party for a long time. It's not that they're more sold out than Republicans. It's just that they pretend not to be. So it's by abandoning their base that they have spoiled the election. And it's really important to throw that back at anybody who tells you you have to keep voting Democrat. It's just bullshit. And yes.
And I can tell you, as I would not have voted in 2016 or 2020 in the general election if there wasn't a green on the ballot.
Yeah. And that is the rule rather than the exception. So the polls don't reflect that at all, because the polls are all drawing from a limited number of people. And they may say, well, how would you vote if third parties were in, and how would they vote if third parties weren't in? But that's not the reality of actually the actual electorate in an election, where there is this largest block of voters that can't be accounted for really in a poll, because they're not really answering the polls. These are disempowered and alienated voters who are going to vote if they hear about you and they have something to actually vote for. So you can't use the polls in advance of an election to say, see, you guys are spoiling it. That's just not the way it works. That's just not reality. And we have to reject. This is just a propaganda scheme, and we just have to stand up to it. Not only because it's wrong and because it is anti-democratic, but because our lives are on the line right now. This is not something just to do for like the climate or for a sustainable economy or for jobs. This is like us. It's like, are you going to keep a roof over your head? Because right now, half of renters are severely economically stressed, just trying to keep that roof over their head. And then they got a gazillion other expenses too. People are really, really struggling right now, and people are really, really sick. And society and our sick food system and the whole thing, and the unavailability of pharmaceuticals, Joe Biden pretends that they are solving this problem through the Inflation Reduction Act, but it basically called for 10 pharmaceuticals to have, bulk purchasing to bring down the price. 10. What a joke, and not until 2026 either. So this is just nonsense. It's really important to reject their propaganda. And yes, Trump is scary, but Biden is scary too. The Democrats, they throw their opposition off the ballot. They have made a big deal announcing that they're going after us, yours truly and others. They are going after us in this election to basically use dirty tricks and legal maneuvers to try to throw us off the ballot. And they actually say this. This is how clueless they are. They actually say this. They say the quiet part out loud. They're announcing their dirty tricks.
They've gotten cocky.
They are manipulating democracy. They're doing what they accuse the Russians of doing, basically, of lying and cheating and unfairly manipulating our elections, which unfortunately at the end of the day, they could not demonstrate, not happening in any big way as far as Russians were concerned. That was kind of a made up propaganda campaign as well. Yeah, there's a bit of that going on, but it wasn't mostly about elections.
So it was 120K of memes. That's what it was. It was like about 120K of memes on Facebook.
Yeah, exactly. And many of them weren't even about the election, So.
Exactly. I think too, and I want to be cognizant of time. There's two other things I really want to get your take on for sure. I think, first of all, I'm sorry to make you answer that question again. I know I get sick of it too. And then I've had some very heated battles. I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm not a Biden supporter, obviously, either. But throwing him off the ballot is the worst thing. And the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So I show this book all the time, 1984. We're sleepwalking into it. And we got to be careful because it could be coming from Joe Biden and the Democrats.